Hi! So this lecture is about photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is a chemical reaction that occurs in plants and other organisms such as algae, where sunlight energy is converted from the form of photons to a chemical energy that can then be used to fuel chemical reactions in living organisms. This is a really important chemical reaction because photosynthesis provides the chemical energy for all other living organisms on the planet, and without it, there wouldn't be us. So it's quite important to understand just a little bit about how it works. So if we take a plant and you look at a leaf, within a leaf there are different substructures made out of cells. So we're looking at a cross section of the leaf over here, and you can see that there's a vein. Veins bring water from the roots to the leaves. You also have some really thin cells on the surface of the leaf, and they're super thin and translucent. That means that they allow light to penetrate through them to this next layer. Oops, let me go back one. This next layer of cells, which are called mesophyll cells, and they have inside of them very special structures called chloroplasts. On the underneath surface of a leaf, there are holes called stomata, and stomata allow carbon dioxide to enter into the leaf and oxygen, which is a waste product, to leave the leaves. Stomata can be open and closed with these little tiny cells called guard cells. It looks like a pair of lips. So let's have a closer look at one of these mesophyll cells. So here's the cell, and inside of the cell are organelles referred to as chloroplasts. A chloroplast, like a mitochondria, has two membranes. It has an outer membrane and an inner membrane. Inside the chloroplast is a thick gooey liquid which is referred to as the stroma. Inside of the stroma are a series of membranes that are stacked, and it's referred to as a thylakoid membrane, and the stacks of membranes are called granum. The chemical reactions of photosynthesis occur across the thylakoid membrane. So the overall equation for photosynthesis is actually sort of the opposite of cellular respiration. If you compare those slides to this one, you'll notice that the starting ingredients are carbon dioxide and water and light energy. And those three ingredients are used through a series of reactions to create glucose, which is the storage molecule for chemical energy, and oxygen gas, which is a waste product and released by the plant. So in photosynthesis, sunlight provides the energy. Electrons are boosted uphill and added to carbon dioxide, allowing sugar to be produced. During photosynthesis, water is actually split into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is bonded to another oxygen atom, and it escapes through the stomata into the atmosphere, whereas the hydrogen is then transferred to the carbon dioxide to produce sugar. There are two stages to photosynthesis. First are what we refer to as the light reactions, and they convert the solar energy into chemical energy. On a molecular level, if you look at the light reactions, they're somewhat similar to the electron transport chain which occurs in respiration. The second part of photosynthesis is called the Kelvin cycle. Sometimes you'll hear it be called the dark reactions, and this is where the products of the light reactions are used to make sugar from carbon dioxide. Kelvin cycle is sometimes called the dark reaction because it can happen in the dark. So some plants will perform light reactions during the day and Kelvin cycle at night. Other plants will go through both the light reactions and the Kelvin cycle at the same time. So let's have a quick look. So here's a model of a chloroplast, and in this model you can see the incoming ingredients are water and light, And water and light in the light reactions result in the production of ATP and the electrically charged molecule NADPH, the waste product oxygen. So the ATP and the ADPH enter the Calvin cycle. Carbon dioxide also enters the Calvin cycle, and these three ingredients, carbon dioxide, ATP, and NADPH, are used to make sugars. The waste from the Calvin cycle are the decharged NADP plus and adenosine diphosphate, and those get used back in the light reactions to get recharged again. So you might not know very much about photons or light, but visible light is a type of wavelength of energy. So photons are a little bit like electrons, and wavelengths can vary dramatically. So photons can be in very short wavelengths or very long wavelengths. So very short wavelengths include things like gamma rays and X-rays, which are a bit dangerous for us, and ultraviolet rays. These have wavelengths where the distance between the peaks of the waves are less than a centimeter. Visible light, or light that our eyes have receptors that can identify the presence of those wavelengths, visible light runs from about 400 nanometers to about 750 nanometers. So red light is between 700 and 750. Blue light is in about 450 nanometers. So you can actually take any color you can imagine and find out what the wavelength of light is for it. We can't see wavelengths of light that are longer than 750 or shorter than 380. Longer than 750 are infrared radiation waves, and you are actually producing infrared radiation right now in the form of heat. So if you used infrared goggles, that would actually allow you to see infrared radiation. Microwaves are even longer waves, and radio waves, which we use for like cell phones and radios, are even longer. And those are penetrating your body even as you're sitting here watching this lecture. Other organisms can actually see, and I put that broadly, or detect wavelengths of light that are outside of the visible light spectrum, such as ultraviolet light. Bees and ants can see in the ultraviolet, and vipers, like rattlesnakes, can actually see in the infrared. Now, the visible light spectrum is extraordinarily important for plants because they use those wavelengths of light to be able to capture energy, to transform it and turn it into chemical energy. Now, one thing with light is whatever you see, whatever color you're looking at, that is the wavelength of light that is reflecting back into your eyes, and all of the other colors are being absorbed by whatever you're looking at. So when you look at a plant and you see a green leaf, you're seeing green because green is the one wavelength of light that is not being used. It's not being absorbed by the plant. So in this little illustration here, you can see light from the sun comes as a white band. White is when you add all the different colors of the visible light spectrum together, they blend to create white light. So that means that a plant is absorbing red, orange, maybe a little bit of yellow, blue, and purple light for its chemical reactions. In your lab, you're going to be exploring and finding out what sorts of different chemical pigments are found in different plants, and you'll be using paper chromatography to try to explore that. Now, what happens? Well, plants have got a molecule called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll looks green because it's absorbing red and purple light. How does this work? Well, you've ever played with glow sticks? Well, what happens is when light hits the chlorophyll molecule, electrons in the chlorophyll molecule become raised to an excited state. They start vibrating. And as they drop down back to their ground state, so they release both heat and fluorescence. It turns out chlorophyll actually fluoresces a deep purple color. And it's this release of heat and light that's used by the plant's chemistry to be able to capture that energy and use it for creating ATP, which is then used in the Calvin cycle to create sugars. I highly recommend that for photosynthesis you have a look at the BioFlix videos. They're in a lot more detail than you possibly need for this class, but I think it's really cool to see how the actual molecules interact with each other.